Hi there, I'm Colin Morgan, the executive producer of Built to Sell Radio. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, you're going to absolutely love our new newsletter, Built to Sell News. We share actionable tips and insights to help you get inside the mind of an acquirer to punch above your weight when it comes time to exit. To subscribe, head over to builttosell.com/subscribe.
Pete Neubig, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
John, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Empire was a property management company. I think I know what property managers do, but just kind of walk me through, how did you get into this business?
Yeah, so pretty interesting. All the way back in 2001, I was a younger man, about 30 years old, and I always wanted to own a business, but I didn't know how to. I did the whole get good grades, go to school, get a good job, and I was doing well in my job, but man, I always wanted more. But I didn't know how to build a business, so I started buying real estate. And I bought so much real estate from 2001 to 2008 that it was no longer manageable. And so I'm like, oh, and I bought a couple of apartment complexes, but mainly single family homes.
How'd you afford it all? Like, were you like wealthy from a family inheritance?
No, you learn how to leverage. And I was buying, I'll be honest with you, I was buying $35,000 houses.
Okay.
So putting 20% down is not that hard to come up with. I was making six figures back then, so I was doing well. And so I was just looking, so and then you end up, as you do this, you meet people, and I met a banker, and the banker's like, oh yeah, we can leverage all this stuff. We can do this. And you just get more opportunities. And that's how I was able to afford them.
So you're effectively managing your own properties.
I was.
How did it go from managing your own properties to having a property management company?
Yeah. So originally when I started managing my own companies, it was at the behest of my CPA. My CPA is like, Pete, you need to create a management company, because my properties were in another LLC, and we had two LLCs with two properties in them. And then I had the LLC for the management company. And then what happened was I had a business partner. His name is Steve. He's a super outgoing, high I, if you're familiar with disc profile. And he's an airline pilot by trade, but he's a natural born salesperson. He's one of these guys that's natural born. Well, we owned 31 single family homes at the time. And we had about 3 apartment complexes that were in different LLCs with different business partners. But Steve and I owned 31 homes. Couldn't manage them anymore. And so we started looking for a management company. So we decided, one day I'm looking at the roster and I'm like, hey, Steve, we have like 60 homes we're managing. He's like, yeah, I've been talking to this guy and that guy. And so we started third partying. When I created the management company for third party for single family, John, I got to tell you, I thought I created a new industry. I didn't realize, I thought like.
I'm not familiar with third partying. What does that mean?
Okay, great question. Yeah. So third party. So when you manage a property and you own the property, that's kind of first. I own my own property and manage it. When somebody else owns the property and they hire you to become the property manager, that's called third party managing, right? I'm managing the property for somebody else. Yeah. And what I didn't realize was that we started managing properties for other people. And we honestly thought we built this business of single family management. We've all heard of multifamily management, but we built the single family management. And then I found an organization called the National Association of Residential Property Managers. And there's like thousands of people that do this. So I didn't create anything. As a matter of fact, I realized once I met those guys, I was doing everything incorrectly. And
what did you learn from the industry association? Like you mentioned, you were doing everything incorrectly. Like what was the big thing that you learned early from the industry association that you then started to apply to your business?
I'll say the first, all right. Like, I don't want to sound too dumb, John. Like, I don't want you have a super educated audience here, but you have to remember, I didn't know anything back then. I wasn't in business. One of the things we did was first of all, we commingled funds, which is like a complete no-no, and I'll put you in jail. So we basically had our operating funds along with some other funds. Second thing, we weren't taking the rents. So if you do any kind of third party management, like the rent is your lifeblood. So we were actually having the resident send the owner the rent, the landlord the rent, and then the resident would call us for issues with their property, and then we would send the vendor out. We'd pay the vendor, and then we try to get the money back from the investor.
So you had like a negative cash flow cycle.
Huge negative cash flow cycle. Huge negative. And because I was only 60 properties and I owned 30 of them, I was literally funding the other 30 properties. And finally, I told people like, hey, we have to start taking the rent. And I think 2 people fired me. because they wanted to rent directly themselves. So so those are two of the smaller, two big things that I found, but also found out like softwares that's specific for the industry, processes, how does, just how to handle certain things. What the, like when somebody doesn't want to do a lease renewal, what do you do? When somebody doesn't want to, sign a management agreement, what do you do? Like there was just so many things that come up in business that you've never, like, especially if you're just starting out, that some grizzly old veteran will be sitting next to you, goes, oh yeah, I figured that one out 15 years ago. Here's how I did it. And you just have this incredible knowledge of all these people, that have been in the business for a long time and seen everything. So I started grabbing a bunch of buddies there, and I literally had people all over the country that I can call every time I came up with it, up against something I didn't know. And because of the organization, my business grew tremendously.
It's funny when I talk to real estate people, they tend to be, I think their mindset tends to be very much like the asset is the dirt, right? The asset is the building. Right? That's what I'm building. I'm building a pool of assets. Oftentimes they don't necessarily think of the company in and of itself as having any value. It's all about the dirt, right? Like, because they think of it as buying and selling homes. At what point did you realize that the company managing people's properties, this third-party management company empire, had value in and of itself, independent of the homes that you owned? Do you remember when that was?
Yeah, it was about 2 years in. So we're doing this, we're figuring stuff out. By the way, the trade, organization got me from not knowing anything, managing 60 homes, to when we sold 5, 7, 8 years later, we're managing almost 1,000 homes in 3 markets, all single family. So the power of joining your local organization and going and investing time by going to conferences, and then investing your time by being part of the organization. Like I was a local chapter president. I was a national, regional vice president, things of that nature. But to answer your question, I'm about 2 years in, and we're not making any profit, right? We're like a lot of startups, even though we were wearing all the hats, any money we made, we were investing back into technology or systems or people, right? And so we were getting kind of frustrated because I'd left my $100,000 a year job, and I think I made $12,000 the first year. I paid myself $1,000 a month, right? And so getting frustrated, and I had a business coach. His name was Doug Winnie, and he was a business coach with Action Coach International. Highly recommend them. And Doug was like, you need to figure out what your business could sell for. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you can sell a business? Like, I had no idea. And he's like, yeah. So one of the metrics that we kept, because profit really wasn't a great metric and I wasn't putting a lot of money in my pocket, one of the things he made me do for my mindset was to look at the evaluation, to look at the valuation. And so we started doing that. So we realized that we started doing some research. We started finding out that valuations of businesses are anywhere from 1.5 to 2x times revenue. So
in your industry,
in my industry,
property management industry. Yeah. Yep, okay. Yep. Got it. So,
the single family property management industry is very mom and pop, John.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a huge amount of big players, especially back in 2012 when I started this thing, all the way to about 2017, 2018, we started seeing some big players come in. But having that data and updating it every month or every 6 months and just reviewing it kind of saved us from some dark days when you can't really pay yourself. And it's like, well, you increase your valuation by $100,000, so you got that going for you.
That's so interesting. So the first step was to figure out like how a company like yours is valued. In this case, this third-party property management business, you found out it was kind of 1.5 to 2 times revenue. So even though you're not necessarily making a lot of profit, you can jack the top line and you're at least growing revenue.
That's correct.
And ultimately the value of your company. Got it. Okay. And obviously for our listeners, every industry is different. So you're going to want to figure out that for you. But in your
again,
case,
I leaned on the organization, the national organization, to kind of help with that. And they didn't have the answer, but a lot of people in the industry would start talking, and they like, oh yeah, well I got an offer for this, or I buy at this, and for a while it was 10 times or X times like management fees. Then or 0.8 times management fees or something like that. Then what happened was some of the bigger players, some PE firms and VC firms started getting in, and they started buying at top line revenue. So that's where I ended up getting my number eventually. I think originally when we were checking it out, it was just like we just did 1 times revenue, and then we moved into that 1.5 to 2 times, and we did 2 just to make ourselves feel better.
Got it. Okay. So walk me through the economics. So I own a home. I don't live in it. I want to rent it out. I hire your company to manage it for me.
Correct.
What do I get for that, and how much do I pay?
Yeah. Okay. So I haven't given the sales spiel in a while here. So I'm a little rusty here,
I'm
but
putting you on the spot.
yeah, put me on the spot. Okay. So typically, not all the time, but typically you get a percentage of rent. So it's usually about 10%. So let's use easy math here. Your house rents for $1,000. I'm going to get $100. What do I do for that? Well, everything. I mean, we're grossly underpaid, to be honest with you, right? If there's an HOA violation, we handle it. If there's a resident that doesn't pay, we handle it. If the resident makes phone calls, we handle it. We handle all the maintenance and coordinate the maintenance. We charge you back on the maintenance. Other ways that we make money is we have a leasing fee where we'll lease the property and we get 1 month's rent in my market. In other markets, it might be $200. Like every market is completely different. And then of course we have the lease renewal. So those are the 3 main fees. There's lots of other ways that management companies make money, but they offer value for either the resident or the owner, and they'll charge something. They'll make a spread on that. But those are the 3 main fees that we make. So
how did you go from managing 60, 80? Like I'm just doing the math. Like at some point with 60 homes, like someone's got a clogged toilet every month. Somebody's not paying. Somebody's like moving, so needs to be like. I mean, this must exponentially become complicated. Like, how did you? Like, what was the biggest? I think people listening to this, some of them are trying to think like, how do I go from here to there? How do I go from $500,000 or $1 million in revenue to double it or triple that? Like for you going from 50, 60 homes to 1,000, like what was the secret?
Yeah. So remember that was over 7 to 8 years time frame. So it wasn't like I was doing 50 homes and then I got 1,000 the next year. That would have just put us right out of business, to be quite honest. Because it happened over time, you just kind of grow over time, right? So in the beginning, 60 homes, it's me and Steve. And the first thing we did was create an org chart and of what we thought the business should look like today. And then we put Steve or Pete in a box. There wasn't 2 guys in a box. It was just a box. And so Steve started wearing the sales and marketing hats. I wore the operational hats. And as we grew the business, we decided to invest money back in the business. So I think the first lesson that we learned was you can take the money out of the business, but that strangles the business and the business won't grow. Right. I know a lot of business owners this way, and they're, especially in property management, they did 200 homes, 5 years ago, and today they're doing 200 homes because they keep taking money out of the business. They don't have money to invest in marketing and sales and people. The number one thing we did was invested in people. And so as we got to, let's say 100 homes, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hire a property accountant. And then I hired a property accountant. I would take that hat off. And so we would throw people at the problem first, right? Because it's a complete service-based industry. Now, we didn't do maintenance in-house, so we had third-party maintenance. So I didn't have to I had to hire the company that hired the guy to go unclog the toilet. I didn't have staff to do that. We did all the back office. So accounting, leasing, lease renewals, maintenance coordination, turn coordination, move out, security deposit disposition. There's a lot of moving pieces. And as we would grow, we would just add more people. And so what we then ran into was that there were so many people that the communication became exponentially challenging. And so that's when we started doing automation systems and really breaking it out and saying, okay, this is your job function. This is her job function. This is his job function, so to speak. So as we grew the business, we just invested more in the business. And then you look up and you're at 300 units. And now your processes are broken. So you redo the process. Now you look up, you're at 600 units. Your processes are broken. You redo the process. You look up, you're at 900 units. And when we sold, our processes we probably had another 300-400 units before our process would break again. It seems like in our industry, especially a service industry, right? I mean, I put a plumber out of business. I gave him so much business because I told all my property manager friends in Houston about him because he was a great plumber. He was a horrible biller and he put himself right out of business. And so for us, we just made sure like that. And we have tons and tons of challenges. Like we were growing rapidly and I was losing clients just as bad sometimes because I couldn't keep up with it. We couldn't keep everybody happy. We had a high churn rate. But then we solved that and then we would grow. Then we'd have that problem again. We'd solve it. Then we would grow. And I'm happy to say that I think we could have actually grown 50% more without having to hire anybody. Like we finally got to the part now because we were hiring like kind of like we needed somebody and we needed him for about 2 months. And then we started hiring him. And finally we got in front of that curve and we started able to understand the math behind it, right? We knew at X amount of properties, we knew that we were going to need a maintenance coordinator. At Y, we were going to need a lease renewal specialist or whatever it was. And so we were able to break up the company into departments, and we were able to then increase through automation and having one person manage 1,000 units for our collections per se.
What's the secret to creating process inside a company? I think a lot of our listeners sort of intellectually know they need standard operating procedures, they need processes, but their stomach turns at the idea of actually sitting down to writing them.
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, it's not easy. I am an integrator by nature. I'm a big fan of Gino Wickman's book, Traction. And so if you're familiar, I'm an integrator. So that's what I love to do. Show me a process flow. And I'm like, yeah, let's have some tequila and process flow stuff out. Like I just love process flow stuff. Right?
You're an anomaly, man.
I am. And so I think the first thing you have to have somebody in your organization that can connect the dots. It doesn't have typically the owner of the company is the visionary. That guy can't even sit down and look at a spreadsheet if it doesn't have colors on it, let alone, do a process flow. So, I was fortunate enough that I had that superpower. And so that was my job. Like that was the last hat I gave up. I call myself the implementation specialist. I don't know what the hell the real name is, but that's what I call myself. And then I found a young kid and he was doing it for me. And as I was kind of exiting the business, I was kind of semi-retired when we sold, and then I had to go work again. But I think that's the first thing is you have to find somebody with that skill set. And if you don't have anybody internally, there are people out there. Again, Traction, they have the EOS. You can reach out to them. I'll shout out to my buddy Errol Allen with EA Consulting. That's what he does. He was 2 years in my business, and then I learned from him, and then I basically ran from there. And so the next thing is everybody has to have buy-in. You got to have the whole team buy in. Because no one wants to write SOPs. No one wants to look at a checklist. But if you show them that it's much easier, that their life is going to be easier, that their stress level is going to go down, that they're going to get less complaints, because all this is true. If you create processes and then from the process, then you can then create automation. And that's where the magic really happens. And so that's the way we did it. And we would meet anybody who's involved in the process, by the way, was in the meeting and they had a say. That's the other thing, right? If you force a process down somebody's throat and they're doing the work, you're not, and you're just coming up with a way to do it, they are going to resent you, and they're going to resist. So we had everybody in a room. No idea was a bad idea. How do you do it? And then somebody would be like, "Oh, what about this?" And I'll be like, "Well, we can't do it because of this, but that's a great idea." So never bash an idea. Everybody's idea was good. Even my virtual team members in Mexico, they were part of the process. They can come up with ideas, and some came up with great ideas. What's the old story about Southwest? The baggage guy was the one who came up with bags fly free, right? It doesn't always have to happen top down.
I didn't know that story. That's interesting. Going back to SOPs, it reminds me of a story I did maybe 2 or 3 years ago now with a woman who ran a catering business in Australia. And I was asking her about standard operating procedures. And she was like, yeah, most people think, I could never ask my employees to follow a process. They're creative. They want to be, creative. And she's like, it's exactly the opposite. If you create standard operating procedures, it enables them to spend their time being creative because they're not thinking about how to do the job. The job's in front of them. There's the 7 steps that are listed. They can now free up those synapses and that mental energy to be creative. But if they're having to use that creativity to kind of try to deal with the problem at hand, it uses up all their cycles.
100% agree.
Yeah, it's such an interesting,
When you run
phenomenon.
into something that you don't know, stress happens.
Right.
And so if you have a policy and a process for everything that comes across your business, your team's never going to be stressed. They know how to do it. They don't use those mental synapses. They do their work in less time. And so then what happens is they can start creating for your business because they're always just thinking about how to make their job easier. When I was managing my team, the number one question I would ask every week is, what can I do to make your job easier? That's my job as the business leader, the business owner, is to give you the tools and to get out of the way. Here's the tool. What else do you need? What else do you need? What else do you need? How can I make your job easier? I want to make your job so easy that you have all this free time in the world. You don't have to work weekends, nights. You can leave early on Fridays if you like. I don't care. To me, as long as the job gets done, and I grew up in the office. I grew up 8 to 5. You had to be there 8 to 5. I just don't subscribe to that anymore. I subscribe to if your KPIs get met and the business is doing well and we're not getting escalations because people say they can't get in touch with you or you're not a good team member, then we're good.
Yeah, well said. So you get this business. I want to go back to the economics of this business for a second. So you get it up to 1,000 customers.
Single family homes.
Yep. Single family homes. Like in terms of revenue, where are you guys at this point? Top line?
Yeah, we were about 2.3 million.
Got it. Okay. Revenue. And so using the math, we talked about earlier, you're thinking this could be close to $5 million. This company is that sort of the math you're doing in your mind?
Yep, correct.
Okay. And was there some sort of trigger that made you and Steve want to sell? Like what happened?
Yeah, that's a whole story in itself, and I'll give you the kind of the cliff notes of it.
Yeah, okay? Sure.
So I'll say the vision that Steve and I had originally was that we were going to own 500 homes together. Like that was the original vision. And then we found out that managing for other people was actually more profitable than actually owning the homes, which is crazy. But we then pivoted. And then we said our vision was to get to 300 homes because we heard that's where you become profitable, right? So that was our first vision. And then our next vision was let's do 1,000 homes all in Houston. Well, somewhere along the line, Steve's vision and my vision were no longer in alignment. He wanted to be 20,000 units across the US, and I wanted to be 1,500 units in Houston and run the most efficient property management firm ever. And so we just, the cracks started forming. And then he's the one who approached me about wanting to sell. And we had run the company so poorly. Remember I told you we invested a bunch of money into the company. And we were kind of spending money instead of investing money in the company, spending money in the company, like mainly on like marketing. Like we weren't spending wisely on marketing because usually if you spend marketing, it's investing. We weren't investing, we were spending money. So our balance sheet didn't look really good. We didn't have a lot of money. And I bring this up because when I have a mentor, my uncle, he's in his 80s now, he still has his own business. And first thing he asked me is, can you buy him out? And the answer truly was no. No bank was going to loan me what we knew or thought what the price was. So I was kind of forced to either say I'm going to sell or not sell. And if I wasn't going to sell, my relationship with my best friend and business partner of 20 years would have been over. And for me, it's always more about my relationships than the business. The business comes first, but at this point, the relationship comes first. So what happened? Go ahead.
Sorry, just for clarity, did you have a shotgun agreement with Steve, like a partnership agreement, which allowed one another to buy each other out on a shotgun clause, or what was your partnership?
Yeah, we had a regular operating agreement. I don't think there was a clause in there because we had never anticipated selling. Okay. I highly recommend having that clause in there. But at the end of the day, if I would have offered him to buy him out, he would have taken it. Like we had talked about that. I just wasn't going to, there was just no way I was going to get the money. And what happened was the industry, whatever industry you're in, believe it or not, it's probably a small industry, smaller than you think. Right? The industry is pretty small. So around 2018, a lot of PE and VC money started coming into our industry. it's a fragmented industry. It's a lot of mom and pops, but there is huge potential, right? Because there's how many, thousands upon thousands or hundreds of thousands upon hundreds of thousands of homes in the United States. So we saw a couple of companies come in and they were buying some property management firms. And Steve had a good buddy named Alex who ended up going to work for a company. And he's like, hey, I think we're interested in acquiring you guys. You guys interested? So we took the meeting. We took a meeting with a company called Pure first. And Pure, they're doing great now. Fast forward 5-6 years, they're doing great now. But back then they were kind of vaporware, meaning they only had a formation. They didn't own any properties yet. They didn't have any tech. There was nothing there. I just remember being in the boardroom and it's me and 5 other guys. And I'm like, visionary integrator. And I could just see the writing on the wall. There was going to be a lot of work for me to be done. And I had just come off of 80+ hour work weeks for like 9 years. And I just got Empire to the point where I was working about 4 hours a day. And by design, I still wanted to work 4 hours a day. I had my staff in place. I had all the escalations going to my sales guy or my operations manager. And we were running a very efficient business, making profit for the first time. And here we come. Like I literally just fix everything. We're profitable. We were making in 2019, we were on point. We were on target to make $500,000 a year. That was, after before taxes.
In terms of profit. Okay.
Yep. And I showed Steve a spreadsheet that was going to get us to 600 the next year. And then within 3 years, I was going to get us to $1 million. And I thought that was pretty nice. I thought that was a good living. Obviously he wanted a lot more. And so even after I showed him all the information, he's like, no, let's move on. So we talked to Pure and we get on the plane home and he's like, what do you think, man? That's going to be great. And I just looked at him. I go, that is a heck of a lot of work, brother. And I just don't want to be involved in that. They didn't have anything yet. So then I think where the conversation's done, I'm going back and I'm working on Empire, growing it, all that good stuff. And then 3 weeks later, he's like, hey, we're going to have another meeting in California with a company called Mind. And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, they want to buy us. So I go there and they already had 8 or 10,000 units under management. They had a whole staff. They had an office. They had the same vision that Steve had with the layout of we want to be a national company. And they made us an offer. And so we fly back on that one. He goes, what do you think? And I go, well, if we're going to sell, I understand if we go with Pure, we'd be much higher up in the food chain. I go, but we'd have to do a lot of work. I go, and who knows if they're actually going to get funded. Like it was before that, And I said, if we go with Mind, they told us that we'd be in the management team. They told us that we can move the needle. That's a VC term, by the way, move the needle. We can make impact. And I'm like, look, if we're going to sell, I think these are the guys. So we fly back out there a few weeks later and we're trying to negotiate. And it's pretty funny actually, because they had a kind of a boilerplate of what they offer, right? So they offer us 1.75 times revenue on all of our revenue. They did include, we had a little bit of sales revenue. So we had a brokerage and we did minor sales. So they were very kind and the offer was very fair, to be quite honest. So they offered us, I think it was I want to say 4.6. I think it was 4.6 million was what they offered at 1.75 times revenue. And Steve always fancied himself as the negotiator. So he's trying to negotiate and they just looked at him and they go, we don't negotiate. We have a mathematical equation on how we value properties and how we value property management companies. And this is it. Kind of take it or leave it. And so, I kind of like, all right, well, they also had put in, so if you can't win the battle of the price, then maybe we can modify the terms a little bit. And so originally they wanted, I think it was a 3-year payout with a 1 year, what do you call that? A 1 year churn churn rate. So they said, okay, let's just say, for example, we had 1,000 properties. So they wanted to pay us 60% on the date of signing, right? And then so you get 60% on the day of signing, and then you get 20 and 20. So I negotiated down from like 3 years to 2. So I got that. And then we took, instead of 30% stock, we took 20%, which in hindsight was a great move by taking less stock. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. And then I negotiated a little bit higher payout up front. So I went from 50% to 60%. And then I negotiated a cap on the churn. So for a churn is basically, let's say I'm giving 1,000 units, right? And then they run my property management company so poorly, it goes down to like 700 units. Then I get hit, and those 300 units, they take that off of the next year's payout. And so I did everything I could to protect that. So number one is I made sure that I was in the management for that division. Number two was we maxed it out up to 20% was the max. So if it went past 20%, they couldn't take any more back. So that's what we did. And I did everything I could. And then also I added, if I bring in more doors, that should counterbalance anybody that we leave, that leaves us. And so once we got there, I think they ended up taking, it's called a clawback. I think they clawed back about 3%, if I remember. It wasn't very bad. And so then on the anniversary date, we got the next 20% minus 3% of the sales price. And then the year following on the anniversary date, we got the last 20%. I didn't make it to the second year, just to be clear. I made about 18 months. They asked me to leave, and I said, thank you. And so but I was one, man, I'll tell you this, John, if I could counsel anybody, I would say, listen, one, when you sell your business, just get all the money up front. Take all the money up front. Do not do a payout. It just causes a bunch of stress, and then you don't know how they're treating your clients. Number two, don't take a job with them. Just ride out to the sunset. Like, because you actually see them tear apart your baby. You know, they have a different way of running, especially if they're VC. I mean, if it's like your neighborly, local property management company buying me, that's going to be different. But a VC company, they have investors they have to answer to, and they're going to treat your clients, your team, everything's going to be different. And so I would take the money up front. I wouldn't take any stock, and I would get the heck out of Dodge. But more importantly, I would know what I'm going to do next. The biggest challenge I had, John, when I sold my business was not that I had a job again. It wasn't ideal. And I realized I was not somebody that can work for anybody anymore. I was depressed. I had more money in my bank account than I ever had. They were paying me more than I ever paid myself at Empire. And I'm on the management team, and I am completely depressed. And I was depressed for almost 18 months, and they deserved to fire me. I was not a good team member. I really wasn't. And I look back on that, and I could have handled it better, but man, I was depressed. Meanwhile, Steve was incredibly happy. And the main difference between us was that Steve already had a springboard, and he went into coaching, and he became an influencer, and he was living his best life. And I was in 8 hours a day of meetings and being told what to do, not really moving the needle, not happy. It was just really. So my advice to people is, if you're thinking about selling, understand where you're going next, because if you don't, even if I didn't take the job with them, I would still have been depressed, because I didn't know what to do. Like, if you're a business owner and you've been running business for however many years, I promise you that's in your lifeblood. That's who you are. And once you don't have that anymore, like, I didn't want to retire at 48 or whatever I was, at the time. And I didn't have enough money to retire. That's not enough money. I owned 45% of the business. Steve owned 45%. We had a silent partner owned 10%. So, you take that into effect, and you take taxes into effect. And you don't get as much as you think. It would have been probably, I think I would have made my money back if I kept the business. I think it was less than 5 years. So think about that. 5 to 6 years, I would have made all the money that I made when I sold. It just wasn't worth it.
Tell me about the bust up with the acquirers. Like what made you only last 18 months? I know you said you were depressed, but was there sort of a straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah, there was. The straw was, so they gave me a job title of Eastern Regional Vice President. Okay. And that was a fancy way. You know how when you go to a bank, everybody's a senior vice president?
Yeah.
Same concept. Okay. I was this vice president. John, do you know Vern Harnish?
Sure.
He wrote the book Scaling Up.
Yeah. Known for years.
So one of my first meetings at Mind, Vern was in the meeting, which is really cool. I guess he had invested some time. He was a coach or whatever, and they gave him some shares. And we went around the room, and it went around to all 23 people in that management meeting, which I knew right there that was a problem. 23 freaking management people, everybody trying to, own their own little fiefdom. But I remember I said something about, we don't treat our people right. We're not treating our clients right. And I was right from the beginning. I was kind of going against the grain. I'm from Texas, originally from New York City. I'm really rough around the edges. I'm not Harvard educated, and all these other people are from the VC world. They're from California. They're about feelings type of stuff, but they were not treating their people right. And I said something, and when it came back around, Vern quoted me on his final comments about like how I was correct. So I thought, man, that's great. I'm going to get something there. No, that never transpired. And day after day, my team, people are leaving. My team is like, they were not reporting to me, reporting to somebody else. My property managers can't get anything done. My clients are calling me. I can't even I can't help them anymore. And so you're seeing it. I mean, just daily. It's just daily. And the straw that broke the camel's back was I get a call from the lady who runs the call service or whatever, like, people can take the phone call. And she basically told me that I am to take all escalated calls from any clients that have an issue with their property manager. And I told her over my dead body, I go, if you do that, I promise I'll be managing properties. I go, the only way I'll take an escalated call is if my property manager escalates it to me, and then me and the property manager and the client sit down together. But if you have the client circumvent the property manager, they're never calling that property manager again. I was fired 2 weeks later.
Wow.
Oh, not fired. I was let go with dignity. They gave me. I'll say one thing about Mind. I don't really like how they did the business, but as far as how they treated me in particular, was awesome. They're great people, and I wish them very well, because I do have 20% of my sale in stock with them. And so, it was just, though, I just, when you run a small business, your client is the lifeblood. Like, you do anything you can with that client. What I found in my experience, when the VC owns the business, your investor's the lifeblood. And there's a disconnect. And they were doing things just to like grow, when I'm like, if we stop growth and we focus on these things, in 5 years from now, we can beat everybody. And 5 years from now, they still have the same problems. I still talk to people. They still have the same challenges they did 5 years ago. And all they are on this wheel. Let's grow. Now they grow. They have a bunch of churn. They get rid of people. We got to save money because we're going to run, they use, words like runway and, move the needle. We're going to run out of runway. So they get rid of a bunch of people. Then they go find more investors. Well, I think the investor thing is drying up for our industry. I'm hearing a lot of, a lot less companies are being sold to VC companies, which is interesting, because now I'm hearing that the sale of companies around 1.2 times revenue. So now your property management company has actually lost a little bit of value, because there's a lot less people buying.
You mentioned taking stock. Maybe just walk through. You own stock. Mind, I don't believe, is a publicly traded company. I think they're privately held.
That's correct.
Right? Okay. So what what rights do you have to sell that, if any?
You can't, my understanding, and I'm not a stock guy, but my understanding is you can sell it on a secondary market.
Okay.
Right. So, and I'll give you the numbers here, right? When I sold the business, they valued their stock at $11 a share. So when I sold the business, they gave me X amount of stocks at $11 a share, whatever 20% of that was. And I took that money with the anticipation of in 5 to 8, 9 years, they're going to have some type of event, whether they get sold or they go public, and my stock's going to be worth $20, $30 a share. Then when I was an employee, I could buy stock at a reduced cost at $2 a share. And so I did that. When I left, I exercised my $2 a share stocks at $2 or one something, whatever, paid tax on it. And now I have all these shares, right? I got this blended of $2 and $11. Well, on the secondary market back in 2017, that was the height. Mine did a deal with a company. I can't remember, but they were, I think their valuation was $880 million. And, there wasn't an event that happened where the stocks were going to change. And so I could have probably, if I knew how to, sold it on the secondary market, and I probably could have got like $8, $9. Well, today, the secondary market, the stock's not even worth the $2 that I got the employee stock on. It's, I think I heard it's like $1 or something like that. So I could sell it, but I'm like, well, might as well ride or die at this point. It's not going to affect my life. And if there's some event does happen and I get something out of it, then great. If not, I'm just my new company and my life moving forward. I just look forward. I don't look back anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So to be clear, when you sold, they valued it around $10 a share.
11
$11 a share. Now it's down around what? So like, yeah, 10 cents on the dollar kind of thing, which
Correct.
is pretty tough.
Pretty brutal.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's why I go looking back, like looking back, I tell people, don't take stock. Just get your money and get it. And you know what? I would take less money. Like if they said, hey, 1.75, let's say 2 times revenue for a 5-year period, 5-year payout, 1.75 for a 3-year, and a 1.5 for we just pay you right. I'll take the 1.5 moving forward. So just pay me out and I'm gone. That's what I would do moving forward.
Good advice. I appreciate you sharing the story with us. And I want to ask you about your new company. Before I do that, though, are you up for a quick lightning round of questions that
I love it. Let's do it.
Exit? Awesome. Okay. So you talked to what do you call Pure, the initial company, and obviously you had this transaction with mine. You may have talked to other people along the way. You obviously had a silent investor, so you also talked to investors. What was the slimiest trick that professional investors tried to play on you, given your relative naivete about the world of M&A?
I got to be honest with you, John. They were pretty straightforward with us. They really were. The guys at Mind, Pure never gave us I never got into contract negotiations with Pure. I just didn't want to go down that road. I wish I could say something bad, but I actually had a really good experience. I mean, although I lost money with the stock and all that, that was buyer beware. I would say that they were pretty open. Like I hired an attorney to review the contract. He wanted to make all these red line decisions, and 90% of them they were okay with. So I don't think they really, unless they were so good that I still don't, 7 years later, still don't know, or 5 years later, still don't know what they did to me.
We talk a lot on the show about the emotional roller coaster that selling a business is, highs and enormous lows. What for you was the high moment and what was the low?
Wow. I think the high moment was when I saw that $1.5 million coming to my bank account, 1.7 million. I'd never seen that in my bank account before. And so I would say that was the high.
Do you remember where you were?
I was home. Yeah, I was home, and I saw it, and I showed my wife, and now we got a nice bottle of wine. And the funny thing is, John, you might or might not ask this, but a lot of people ask me, like, what did you do with what did you do with the money? What's the one big guilty pleasure you did?
I'm getting there.
Are you gonna ask that question?
Well, I just did. Go.
Okay. My one, what I ended up? I bought 5 houses, all rentals. That's all I did.
From the frying pan into the fire. Is that the old expression?
I don't manage them though. I have a management company. I would say my lowest of the low, I'll never forget it. I was sitting in my office right where I am today talking to you. And I had literally just lit up my boss. like you're not supposed to do that, right? I mean, I was I wouldn't say lit him up, but you can tell I was very frustrated. And my wife was working from home because of COVID. She comes down here and she goes, "You need to leave that job." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You are nasty. You're not allowed to talk to people like that." She's in HR, by the way. So that was the low because, that's something that I can control. And I was completely out of control. I would say that was the low.
You've already mentioned your coach from Action Coach, EOS, the Traction book, all great resources. Was there any other resources that you turned to educate yourself about the world of M&A that you could point our listeners to that they might find valuable?
I hired an attorney that was their job. They were practiced in mergers and acquisitions. I'm a big fan of, like, if I don't know it, like, I need to hire somebody that could protect me. And that has gotten me in trouble at times, to be quite honest with you. If you could, at the end of the day, no one's going to protect you like you protect yourself. But I didn't even know where to begin. So I hired the attorney. It happened so fast, John, that there was not a lot of time for me to go out and become an expert in M&A. And so
I think an M&A attorney is incredibly valuable. I refer to them as the left tackle. You remember the movie The Blind Side?
Yeah.
In the book, The Blind Side, the left tackle, the most important, because the quarterback's usually right-handed and blind side is the left side. The job of an attorney, as you point out, is definitely to protect you. And I think hiring someone who's lots of experience in M&A, in particular law, is really valuable. So I think that's a great answer.
And be okay with spending some money on that attorney, because that guy can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, well said.
Right.
Well said. I know folks are going to want to reach out to you on social. What's the best channel to do that on? What are you up to now? Just give us a quick view of VPM and the business you're running now.
Yeah. So when I left Mind, I was working on VPM, and what VPM is, it's a marketplace that connects remote team members, virtual assistants in second and third world countries, mainly Philippines, Mexico, and Central America, with companies in the US and Canada. And we focus primarily in the real estate industry. So if you're a contractor or a property management company, multifamily, single family, things of that nature, we do all the back office work. It's a free marketplace. So you find them on the platform, you negotiate directly with them, and you pay them through the platform. It's all free for the company to use, and the VA pays us 10%. And so it's a marketplace play. And it's interesting getting into tech at 51, 52 years old. Is I go to these conferences now, and like at property management, I'm like the average age. When I go to these tech conferences, I'm like somebody's dad. Like,
right, who brought their dad?
Who brought their dad? I'm like, no, I own a company.
Where can people learn about VPM? Is there a website you can point people?
There is. If you go to vpmsolutions.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm terrible at LinkedIn, but I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and email. I'm old school. Email is probably the best way to get me. Pete@vpmsolutions.com.
Awesome. And so we'll put Pete's email, the VPM company, and all the coordinates, spelling of Pete's surname, which is a little unique, in the show notes at builttosell.com. Pete, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the time.